So stoked to be with you guys this morning and super stoked just to get in the Word. That's the exciting part of the devotion is just to be able to crack open the Bible and read a little bit and see what it says to us for today. So we are going to be in our third part of First Corinthians chapter 15. And this is a real long chapter. So forgive me for taking a little bit of time to kind of go through it. There's so many good things in this chapter, and I hope you guys are enjoying it. So you can always check out the YouTube archives at my YouTube channel, Bo Willette. So let's get into it. Verse 20. It's May 9th. Great time to get into 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It says, "But the fact is that Christ did actually rise from the dead and has become the first of millions who will come back to life again someday." Now, I kind of like the more specific versions when it comes to this exact sentence. It talks about Christ being the first fruits of those who have risen from the dead. Now, the reason why that's important is because when you hear the term first fruits in your Bible, that is a reference to something in Judaism. That is probably to the feast of first fruits. And it's kind of interesting because Jesus died on Passover, which was on the 14th of the first month, Nisan of the Jewish calendar. Then you had the Feast of Unleavened Bread that was the next day on the 15th, and Jesus was buried. And then you have the Feast of First Fruits on the 16th day of Nisan, where Jesus rose. And so the idea is that Jesus is fulfilling the feasts, he's fulfilling the Old Testament. Now, this is kind of neat because Jesus told us that he actually came to fulfill the Old Testament. And so Paul picks up on that, of course, and being a Jewish man, he knows the festivals and he knows what first fruits meant. And that Jesus would be the first fruit of the harvest. Of what harvest? The harvest of those who raise from the dead. And the idea is that there's going to be a promise. There's a promise of a further resurrection. The first fruits rose from the dead, the first of the crop, Jesus being the first, and then after him will be the rest. So it's kind of when you celebrated first fruits, you were in hope of a future crops. So you looked at the first part of it and you go, man, there it's coming, here it is. We're gonna have a good crop, and you celebrated the feast of first fruits, and for the hope of something greater in the future, a future gathering of fruit of harvest. And so, I love that because it's an anticipation, And hey, what's your anticipation like today? Are you anticipating something good? Are you anticipating that God's going to do something good? Now, I watched a little bit of news, and I didn't actually watch TV news, but I actually watched a couple clips of like news and like on YouTube, just a couple things that caught my eye that I watched. And just in watching those few clips, not many clips at all, but just in watching those, man, dude, my emotional, mental kind of wherewithal just really went down. I just felt super sad, was super bummed. Just thought, man, dude, everything's messed up, man. God, it's amazing how what people are thinking out there. And it's like you just get really into this kind of cave. And, the Feast of First Fruits is kind of looking at Jesus, though. It's so different because it's a looking at Jesus in anticipation for something greater to happen. And I like the idea that where we draw our eyes, where we draw our focus, our mental focus, our energy, our intellectual energy, really is going to help us in the future. It's really going to help us with that harvest. If I'm intellectually looking at Christ and studying the life of Christ, learning about Christ, learning about his word. What was Christ interested in? Can I be interested in those pursuits? See, that's where my intellectual drive is. Then I have great anticipation. But if I get my eyes off Christ and I start looking at other things, um, other people, and what they're talking about and what they think the real problem is and what they want to implement to fix the problem. They're all trying to fix things. I find ultimate failure. I see the pride. I see the despair. And I don't see much, there's not much anticipation for me of a good future. And so, first fruits, the idea of Jesus rising from the dead, and that it says he's the first of millions who will come back to life again. There will be a wonderful gathering. Now, if you study all the Feast of Israel, you're going to see a real Jesus picture in them all, right? Jesus is crucified on Passover. He's buried on unleavened bread. He's risen on the Feast of First Fruits. And then Pentecost comes and he sends the Holy Spirit, the Feast of Pentecost. Then the Feast of Trumpets, which was the blowing of the trumpets after the ingathering of all the harvest, right? After the harvest of the people come in, then there's the trumpets that are blown. And then later on in that month, there's a Feast of what? Atonement. And then the Feast of Atonement comes and there's a judgment. And Jesus is going to come back to judge the world. And then there's a Feast of First Fruits, and Jesus is going to come back and rule and reign. And you really see a prophetic significance with the Feast of Israel and with the work of Jesus. And Paul understood that. So cool, man. It's really neat to study for sure. So it says, death came into the world because of what one man, Adam, did. And it is because of what this other man, Christ, has done, that now there is the resurrection from the dead. Everyone dies because all of us are related to Adam, being members of his sinful race. So this definitely it shows to be true. We all are from Adam, therefore we all sin. We all have a quality of us as humans, a default to be bent, to go the wrong way. And this is what you see in the world. If people know God without knowing their own wretchedness, that is not good. That's what Blaise Pascal said, the mathematician in the 1600s. He said, it is equal bad for mankind to know God without knowing their wretchedness, and also just as dangerous to know your own wretchedness without knowing God. Man, so true, right? But when we come from Adam, all of us are from one blood. That's right. There is only one group of people. Don't believe the hype. There ain't a bunch of groups of people. There's just one group of people, right? That's what the Bible teaches. We're all from one blood. We are all brothers and sisters in the human family. And we all come from Adam. And so we all have his nature, the fallen one, right? So we should all look at one another, understanding that probably we're all messed up. And if we don't admit that, if we don't understand our own wretchedness, all we become is prideful, self-righteous people. And unfortunately, that's probably where we're at, is a whole lot of narcissism. And wherever there is sin, death results. Right? Wherever there's sin, death results. So is death resulting? Yeah, so there must be sin. Christ rose first. When Christ comes back, all his people will become alive again. So there's an order to things. Christ rises first, and then he will come back, and then his people will become alive again. We will be identified with the new man it talks about, right? The other man, Christ. Just as we are united in Adam, so we are united also by faith in Messiah. And so we will partake of the Messiah's blessing as well, the new body, the new nature. And so we get to partake of that too. So he says, after that, the end will come, and he will turn the kingdom over to God the Father, having put down all enemies of every kind. Yeah. And that's something I think for us to always remember is that, it seems like God's got a hold of everything. He's got the handle on things. He will put down all enemies of every kind. Notice the Christian life is one of loving our enemies. And judgment belongs into the hand of God. That's what the Bible teaches. Vengeance is mine, declares Yahweh, declares the Lord. Well, who does the judging? Jesus does it, right? And it says, for Christ will be king until he has defeated all his enemies. You might want to read Psalm chapter 2 just to maybe get a little insight into that there. It says, including the last enemy. Now, what's the last enemy? You might think, oh, it's got to be this people or those people or this thing and, that kind of thing. And if you're watching the news all the time, that's probably how you're thinking is in that way, is that there's all these enemies out there and they're all over the world. There's all these different countries. Well, the last enemy is actually death, it says here, including the last enemy, death. Isn't that cool? See, the resurrection is a conquering of death. It is a moving past death to life. So death isn't the end. It actually is a move into the next part, which is the resurrection. Wow, that's what Christ has come to do, is literally alter the nature of death itself. So death is no longer separation from God, but death is now a move towards drawing closer to God. As we die, we just shed this body only with the promise of a new body. Pretty cool. It says this too must be defeated and ended. For the rule and it says, for the rule and authority over all things has been given to Christ by his Father. Except, of course, Christ does not rule over the Father himself, who gave himself his power to rule. So we see that just as there is a role or an order we see in the church and in the family, we see that it stems from this wonderful order within the Godhead. Isn't that crazy? Just as there's a role within the church and within the family as far as like leadership and that kind of thing. And Paul's been touching base with that in this book. Here, when he's talking about Jesus and his Father, he's talking about these same kind of things. It doesn't mean that they're not of equal value or of equal importance. It means they have a different function, a different role, right? Everybody in the company is important, man. And if the shipping people all went on strike, then nothing gets done. But if the inventory order control people don't do what they're supposed to do, then inventory's not going to get done. If you don't have designers designing, then that ain't going to get done. Everything has an important part to play. And so everybody has value. Yeah, even if you don't make the same amount of money, it doesn't mean you're not as valuable. Sometimes we can equate people's value with compensation, but not always. It's not an always type of thing. People are valuable if they make little or they make a lot. Yeah, I wouldn't expect someone to come into a company first year making the same amount as the guy who's working really a similar job, but he's been there 25 years. I would imagine this person who's been there 25 years would probably make a little more. But it doesn't mean they're not valuable. They each have a valuable part. Well, we see that here. And you got a valuable part too to play, and I got a valuable part to play. And am I willing to play that part? Or do I always see myself as a victim? Like, man, I'm not getting what they got. Am I being covetous, envious, right? Those are some huge sins in our day and age, right? Envy, covetousness, right? We envy people that do good. we think we make it clear that they're really in the wrong when they're doing good things because we're envious of it. We believe we should have the same thing no matter what. We become covetousness. You shall not covet your neighbor's car. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's job. Right? We are a people of coveting. But notice how Christ just, man, he just loves his Father so much. He knows his place. And he's right in there, right? I love that. I think that's a good example to us. It cuts us like a knife, no doubt, man. It cuts us like a knife because we want to, in the fallen nature, in the Adamic nature that we have from Adam, we want to covet. We want to envy. And all that causes is, Jesus said, strife. Yeah, gnarly word, right? Do we have a lot of strife in our world? In our country? Maybe it's because we're people of coveting. Maybe we covet a lot. I don't know. Just a thought. Anyway, verse 28. When Christ has fully won the battle against all his enemies, then he, the Son of God, will put himself also under his Father's orders, so that God, who has given him the victory over everything else, will be utterly supreme. If the dead will not come back to life again, then what is the point? What point is there in people being baptized for those who are gone? Why do it unless you believe that the dead will someday rise again? And why should we ourselves be continually risking our lives, facing death hour by hour? For it is a fact that I face death daily. That is as true as my pride in your growth in the Lord. And what value was there in fighting wild beasts, those men of Ephesus, if it was only for what I gain in this life down here? If we will never live again after we die, then we might as well go and have ourselves a good time. Let us eat and drink and be merry. What's the difference? For tomorrow we die, and that ends everything. Don't be fooled by those who say such things. If you listen to them, you will start acting like them. Get some sense and quit your sinning. For your shame, I say it. Some of you are not even Christians at all and have never really known God. Wow. So Paul finally kind of lays it down to the Corinthians that, some of you don't even know the Lord. And that's a pretty radical, but he just realizes that they just don't really know Jesus. And notice what he says. He says, hey, even in your guys' life, why are you guys saying there's no resurrection? Are some of you saying there's no resurrection? And then why are you guys baptizing, doing these baptisms for the dead? Which was kind of a common cultic practice. It wasn't something abnormal to the Corinthians, these kind of ideas of trying to, conjure up the dead or be like a, what do they call it? A proxy baptism, be baptized for someone else. Kind of, you play their part, right? And, Paul never says this is a good thing. He doesn't make any kind of moral, hey, that was good or that's bad that you were baptizing for the dead. He just says, man, why would you even, how silly you guys are. Why would you not believe in the resurrection, but yet you still hold on to these practices of baptizing for the dead if there's no life after death? There's no resurrection. So he kind of puts this spin on it and says, you guys, not that you guys are practicing the right thing, but he's just saying, why are you practicing that? Where's your logically? What are you guys thinking logically? And then he says, hey, and if there is no resurrection, then why would no life after death, then why would we risk our lives? Why would we live this way? Again, it would be foolish. Why would we risk everything by teaching this? That puts our lives in jeopardy. And yeah, being a Christian put their life in jeopardy. That's right. The hegemony was not Christianity. That's what people don't realize today in the universities, unfortunately, is that they talk a lot about hegemony, but they don't realize that Christianity was a persecuted faith. It was one where people were killed because of their faith in Christ. We actually worship a Messiah that was crucified by the hegemony, by the ruling power, right? Yeah. And notice what it says: if there is no resurrection too, then eat, drink, and be merry, right? For tomorrow we die. There's no point. Then maybe if there is no life after death, then hey, why not just be as covetous as you want? Just be as narcissistic as you want. It's all about you. It's all about your body, man. Your body, your thing. You, I, me, I. Yeah, just keep going that direction. It's all about you. That's right. Everything's about you. And don't think about anybody else. Don't think about nobody else. Just think about yourself and find happiness in dwelling on you. Yeah, that's what Paul says. There's no life after death. All you got is you. Good luck. And that's how a lot of people are living. They throw off God. They go, oh yeah, there's no God. Why? Because science told us there's no God. And we all know from the last year, trusting in science, yeah, that'll do it. And, I'm being a little facetious for sure. But, when we trust in human beings as everything, we find failure. And when we find failure, it leads us into despair because we've worshipped something with feet made of clay. And then when we fall into despair, we turn inward. And all we do is look at ourselves. And we might find some happiness in there, but then it ultimately leads to more despair because we find that we are people with feet made of clay as well. And that we're not even a good God to worship, though we try and we try and we try again. Eat, drink, be merry, for tomorrow we die. Very fatalistic, very nihilistic, very narcissistic, and super coveting type of life, right? And so, that's something that we have to kind of ponder and think about. What happens when we do throw off God? What happens to a society when we toss out a book like the Bible? Which I certainly wasn't raised around, but boy, man, what a change! What a cool book it is. Very neat, in many ways. So, man, what a neat devotion! What a lot of cool things to think about. The power of the resurrection, the understanding that we are fallen people. We have this kind of nature from Adam, and we also have this new nature from Christ, and that gives us a lot of hope too. And I love that. So a lot of good stuff about our roles, and that we get that from Jesus too, who played his role, being very submissive to the will of the Father, and that we can learn to be submissive ourselves, and that's a good thing. And also looking at, that inner covetousness that wants to just want things and rule things, and that narcissism, and instead maybe living more of a Christ way and thinking about how I can bless others, how I can be there for others. Again, try to kill the noise and try to get your mind focused on Christ. That gives us an anticipation of something so much greater. So, hey, hope you guys enjoyed the chapter 15. Man, we still have more of this chapter to go. I can't believe how long this thing is, but it's a great one. Okay, you guys take care. Bye-bye.